Yeah, I've said it. I'm white trash and I'm in trouble. So, while I have a beer with you, the Charles Bukowski style, beer in a conversation, beer in a poem, I do want to talk a little bit about AEW. And there are people talking about that AEW should move. And also, if AEW All Out is in a situation where it's going to be like, a loss of a show, really. And this is very detrimental for AEW because there's two things that can happen with AEW. They can make the best show possible, and people can say, "Hey, that's a really awesome show," no matter what how many people are watching. Or they can repeat what they did last year during WrestleMania season when they had Super Card of Honor, Dynasty, the CM Punk footage, Battle of the Belts, and a lower attendance rating and lower viewership rating. Like, honestly, sometimes when people are in a lull, they can bring out the worst in themselves when ultimately you got to bring out the best in yourself. So, you know, I really think that they should have the show at the same time and then just book the best damn show that they can, really. And I've also said, too, that the way for AEW to win is to play the long term game. That's what you do in business. Sometimes in business, you have to take a loss. And part of losing means you're going to learn long term, really. Because I've said before, you kind of look at, like, October. I don't know the pay-per-view schedule, but what I know is that the week before AEW at the Chia Fitz Arena in St. Louis, going there to get some great barbecue. I'm going to go to Bound for Glory on the TNA show. It's like $100. Why the fuck not, really? Mr. Bartley's has great burgers, but they can even counter book, like NXT shows or TNA if they want to do that. But I also just feel like, that ultimately with AEW, I've said this many times, that this needs to be a year of restructuring. And a lot of people are getting this wrong. Restructuring does not mean going to smaller and smaller and smaller arenas because less people are showing up, really. Because they're going to end up like TNA Wrestling. Because I remember a few years ago, they did something where it was called like the Base Brawl in TNA Wrestling, where you have a wrestling ring in a minor league baseball stadium. So going smaller and smaller is not the way to do things. It's looking at what's wrong with the show, watching a lot of people's review on television, on YouTube, and ultimately just saying, hey, where do we want to go? Where do we want to go with this? Like, where do we need to improve? So yeah, that's just the thing about it. Where does AEW need to improve, and what can they do to counterbook it? I've said many times, they should do Okada versus Hangman, heel versus babyface. The other thing is that I don't remember them ever having a Japanese person ever face anybody for the WWE title and successfully winning. Really, like I think like Okada should be the AEW champion in the future. But I also kind of think that it's a good look, really, because they don't really push Asian men wrestlers that well in WWE. I know like Shinsuke Nakamura. I think he contended for the AEW title. I think Antonio Inoki held the WWF championship, but it's not really recognized. But they can kind of counterbook it with that, really. They can also counterbook it with a woman's blood and guts match. Because do you think any of the women in WWE are going to be in something like that? But also, like I've said, you have 10 women in that match. So it elevates all the women in that match if they do a really excellent banger job, really. So then instead you have three people in the women's division that are highlighted, which is Mercedes Moné, Athena, and Tony Storm. You have other women being, brought up a level, really. I've said this many times. Chris Jericho, if he's leaving AEW, can he have one more match in Canada? Can he put over a new guy like Anthony Bowens? You have LFI, and I've said this before. LFI represent people trying. I mean, they can do an angle where they're representing people trying to like get their way, or how the veterans have not helped them out, like Jake the Snake Roberts or Dustin or Chris Jericho, and they want to have a match with Brodito. So it's, as I said, it's people using, it's Latino American people using bad ethics and the other team using good ethics. You can do something with that, like Hologram versus his clone role. Like I said, call him Virus, because Virus sounds way cooler than Clone. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they can do. Really, what is MJF gonna do? Like I think it's gonna be MJF versus Mark Briscoe. That'll be interesting. Darby Allin versus John Moxley. Alex Windsor. You can do an emotional story of her in a blood and guts match, or you can do an emotional story of her. How should I kind of say this? Like going like Mercedes Moné, like DQs and causes a problem tonight, so they're gonna do something like say, hey, we're gonna do a rematch in a cage or whatever at All In, really, because she wants to honor her husband. There's an emotional story within that. So, there's a lot of matches that they can do that actually are story based, and AEW struggles with story based matches. They have a lot more action than stories. And as I said, that ultimately you can do multi-year stuff. You can do storylines that last a couple of months. You can start the storylines here. Like I've said, do the Ops versus Ricochet and the Gates of Agony versus like do the Ops, Hurt Syndicate, and Ricochet and the Gates of Agony. You set up Bobby Lashley versus Powerhouse Hobb, get them rough and beating up each other a little bit, and then then that's a match for Wembley Stadium. Wardlow and Josh Alexander versus Brodito, that would be a good match. What about if you had the women's blood and guts match? And I said this, but what if you had Thunder Rosa in that match? She turns heel and then she joins LFI. What if you had a mystery opponent? Like, there's going to be two mystery people. It's going to be Thunder Rosa for the babyface side. She turns heel. And then what if you do Bazilla and you have Bazilla become a woman in the Don Callis family? That would be interesting. Or you have Nyla Rose join the Hurt Syndicate. I mean, there's a lot of creative things that they can do. There's some twists and turns that they can do. And there's a lot of things they can do to set up for the future. Like, I think that if you do Okada versus Hangman, you can have Omega versus Takeshita. Winner of that faces Hangman at Wrestle Dream, which is an Antonio Inoki show. Wouldn't it make sense to have a former IWGP champion and the current G1 winner have a match with each other in Canada, and then you have Takeshita versus Hangman, so he could be a double heavyweight champion. He has the AEW championship, and then he also has the IWGP championship. Or, he loses, Okada loses. They're kind of smug. They kind of, Okada rubs his face, and you can have Okada versus Takeshita at Full Gear. And maybe Okada wins by cheating, and then you do a 2 out of 3 falls at World's End. You kind of see what I'm fucking going with. You kind of see how there's so many stories that they can do that can kind of lead to other matches in the futures, really, or a series of matches. So, like I've said, really, it's not moving the show. It's not starting it early. It's ultimately saying, hey, let's look at the best product and let's look at what we can set up, not just for this month, for other months as well, really. So, like I've said, AEW has the ability to really, really just, do their best, put their best foot forward with this. And if they don't do it, then fuck them and suck my dick, really. That's part of business. You're gonna have people who really try to who really do what they can to take you out, really, and you got to know how to stand up for it. For example, I've been many times in my life, I've met dirtbag people who cheated me or taken advantage of me to become successful. Like when I did the 40-hour film project, I had people steal my ideas. I've had people take. I actually remember doing a lot of work on people's projects. They would take my name off, put their name on it. I had people sabotage me and other things like that, really. So. I also just, want to mention all that stuff, really. And that's that, really. So I do want to say that that definitely that's important. And it's important to kind of bring your best foot forward, really. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.